So some of you have heard this many times before, this basic narrative, but let me quickly refresh it. If we went back 20 years, we'd note that all of the interesting IT, or much of the interesting IT that people talked about, was done on university campuses. So there's a colleague of mine at the University of Washington that's fond of remarking, at some point in the early 80s, American universities accounted for something like 60% of all IP traffic and something like 40% of all email traffic in the world. And now we account for some tiny fraction of 1% of both of those things, because everybody else caught up. And in fact, not only caught up, but in many cases overtook us. While we were pleading with people to take us seriously in the 90s, they did, and gave us a lot of operational things to worry about. And other people started doing interesting things, so that in fact your best experience of IT now might be from a social site or from Amazon or eBay or something like that. It's rarely a university-provided resource that people are astounded by. And so the general tone of what I want to do is, and there's lots more we could talk, or I could talk at any rate, for a long time on this idea of whether IT is kind of done now and we just become an operational unit, or whether in fact, as my strong preference is that in fact we haven't even really begun to scratch at what IT can do in a university environment. And by that, I'm referring to the two core activities of the university, the teaching mission and the research mission. I'm not talking about paying your bills electronically. That is not a university mission. So I just make this general kind of observation that we've become essential to the minute-by-minute operations. And simultaneously, we note that much the core of what we do hasn't changed hardly at all in, depending on your time frame, 100 years or 500 years. The challenge is, as I note here, that we do have to provide operationally credible services that people rely on a minute-by-minute basis on the campus, and simultaneously provide new, breathtaking applications that actually change the core businesses of the university. That's our challenge. So this is a picture of a classroom. This is a real painting from the University, I think, of Dresden. It's a German university. And it's from something like 1390 or 1410 or something like that. And there's an instructor instructing people arranged in serried ranks. And in 5 centuries, not a lot has changed. The people on the front row are paying attention. The people on the back row are either asleep or talking to each other. It's a somewhat more colorful set of outfits than we'd see today, and the hair is a lot longer and more kind of extravagant. But that's a classroom from 5 centuries ago. And here's a classroom from about a year ago. The same serried ranks. This picture was actually taken while class was in session. We're not waiting for something to begin. We have both genders represented now, which wasn't true in the first picture. But we have people asleep. We have people talking to each other. We have some people listening, I guess. What's kind of disturbing there is the complete lack of change. And if there is technology in that picture, when this was taken, it's a technology that's distracting from the learning moment. Checking Facebook, texting my buddy about dinner tonight, whatever it is. I'm not learning using that stuff, but it's getting me through the class somehow or another. So before we talk about our research infrastructure, which is what I want to spend most of our time on, I wanted to just refresh or put in a context the work that we're also doing elsewhere. You know about signals, and at the risk of dragging this thing out interminably, if you'd like to ask a question while I'm blathering on, please just... I don't think there'll be two people raise their hands at the same time, all right? But please do ask a question. So signals is work that Johnny Campbell did as part of his PhD. What does it trade on? It trades on the fact that we're a big institution and we have lots of data. And in fact, we have lots of data about how students perform in a classroom situation. And with some secret sauce in there, we can tell as early as the first 2 weeks of class how well a student's likely to do in that class. That's kind of remarkable. It's before a graded assignment has been given, but it's based on their interactions with online media, how they do things, how they approach the topic. Who's at risk in this scenario? Well, students from well-prepared schools are going to do well wherever they are. And weak students from poor environments are typically not going to do very well. Who this helps, who signals helps, are students, good students from weak high schools. What do I mean by that? They've got A's all their high school career. They've got A's because they're basically kind of smart kids and they turn up and they do the work that's assigned to them, and guess what? They get an A. And they haven't been in a particularly testing environment. They come to Purdue and it looks like that class I just showed you earlier. It looks like the high school class they were in, and they tootle along, and they might be in a big introductory class. In fact, there's a fair bet that they will be. And the first grade they get back might be a B or a C. And they've never seen a grade that looks like this. They've never seen it. As the educational psychologists would say, they do not have good help-seeking behavior patterns. They don't know what to do. They certainly don't want to go and ask for help, because they know the kinds of kids that had to go and ask for help in their high school. And they are definitely not in that group. So you can be 7 or 8 weeks in here and be in big trouble. That's the beauty of this stuff, that it warns you discreetly at 2 or 3 or 4 weeks in, you need to do something different because you think you're sprinting and in fact you're jogging. And the system is designed nicely so that the faculty member decides the intervention. Come see me, go see a TA, go to the writing lab, whatever the faculty member wants to put in for their class, that's the message the student gets. Students like it, surprisingly enough. Hot seat collaboration is another tool that has been developed here that's kind of interesting. So if I was very brave, and I'm not, we could have a hot seat session going on in here right now. And how would that work? I would be here talking to myself, probably, showing this thing, and we'd have another screen up on the side here that would show all the tweets or comments or instant messages that you wanted to say about my presentation. It's kind of interesting. We have a number of faculty that use that in different and innovative ways. So if I've got 350 students in a class and I ask a question, you know as well as I do, it's going to be the same 10 kids that answer the question. The other 340 aren't going to. With the opportunity for hot seat, everybody gets to talk almost simultaneously because the stream of comments appears down the side, and the faculty member might actually pick one of those comments out and say, John, you said this, why do you think that? What does that trade on? It trades on this peculiar little reality that we've all experienced, that we see on CNN headline news, and even better on ESPN, because that's where there's a lot of innovation right now. You watch television, which is a remarkably stupid, technically speaking, device. But here's this talking head still giving me the information, and along the bottom is a ticker that's going at one speed, and at both sides are ribbons that are giving me more information. The trick is, they're all doing it at different speeds, and I can pass those things simultaneously. It's not 4 people's heads on a screen all giving me that information, because I can't make sense of that. But I can actually read a ticker and listen to the guy simultaneously. Hot seat trades on that. I don't think, again, we're even near to the, we've got a couple of instances of it being in use. But I think the creativity of our faculty will look at this already and say, oh my goodness, there's an interesting idea. Another model, for example, is the text isn't displayed here. But K is my teaching assistant, and all the texts flow to K. And I make some comment about internal rate of return, and 6 people immediately, it's equivalent of like elbowing your colleague, 6 people immediately say, what's internal rate of return? And Kay might say then to me, in the manner of a TV producer, Gerry, you need to just explain internal rate of return because there's a group of people in the class who don't get it. Models like that. Why do we like hot seat? Because it uses technology that students already have. SMS-enabled phones, laptops, hot seat, Twitter. You don't need to buy anything additionally to take part. Two more things that we've done. Mixable, which now interfaces directly with Facebook, so that when I log into Facebook, there are the classes that I'm enrolled in at Purdue, and there are the other people enrolled in my class at Purdue in a Facebook group with me. And using that, and I always want to say drop dead. What's it called? Dropbox, thank you. Using that and Dropbox, students can actually share very large files with each other, which is useful. I took a picture, this is the picture that we ended up with, blah, 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 of the chemical, of the layout of the poem, of the picture, and I share that with the other students in my class. It's nice. It's connecting our systems directly, again, to a system that the students are already using, in this case, Facebook. Double take, new play using video. What's the role of video in instruction? Not quite sure yet. It's got an immediate use in the forensics classes that it's being used in right now. Another thing that we do here, and we do well, is we've developed these hubs for scientific communities, knowledge-based communities. So if I'm in a community of scholars, and we have common applications, common texts, common research, common data that we share between us, the hubs are a very effective way of making those resources available to the community. So it's kind of like Facebook for researchers, if you wish. This has proved to be quite a well-received product in the scientific community, especially on this campus. We have a consortium of 4 universities. 3 universities? 4. Us, Clemson, Wisconsin, and Indiana. That's right. And they contribute funds to enable us to make this a sustainable product. We can talk about that separately. It's nice to have, and I'm not going to touch on this now, nice to have something that works in a classroom. How do you turn it into something that's useful if 200 institutions want to use it? That's a fairly big transition that we have to worry about. We don't have good business models for that yet. So this is what I would like to talk about, and I know you kind of know this, but I'm going to reiterate it again because I think it's something that has been actually a great success for us, and that's the community cluster program. Lots of places have community clusters. There's no novelty in that. Lots of places. But when you go and look at other folks' community clusters, what it is 8 civil engineers have come together and bought a machine. Or a group in genomics has come together and bought a machine. Usually the number of participating faculty is small, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, that kind of number. And they're machines bought to service that community alone. What do we do here that's different is we say to the faculty, you're going to buy hardware, so we're going to do a couple of things for you. We're first of all going to negotiate a much better price than you can get by yourself. What do I mean by much better price? I mean instead of a node costing around $2,000, you're going to be able to buy it through this program for $1,500. Not $1,990. $1,500, like significantly less. Through the 3 years of the program, our average savings for our average node have been between $500 and $700 per node compared to the best university price available. Not compared to the list price. Nobody pays list. Compared to the best university price. So you can go if you want and buy it from CDW or from HP or from Dell or through purchasing or whatever, and you'll just pay more for exactly the same piece of equipment. So that's the first thing. So it's a buying program. If nothing else, it's a buying program. Secondly, if you contribute the node that you've bought to the cluster, we will pay for everything else. We will pay for the chassis, the internetworking, a certain amount of storage, not as much storage as you can eat, but a certain amount of storage, and we'll run the machine for you. The quid for the quo here is, when you're not using it, we want to be able to schedule it for other people. That's the deal. That's based on the actual practice that most machines are used about 15% of the time. That's busy for most machines. 85% of the time they're just sitting there. What does that mean in practice? Over the 3 years that we've been doing this, faculty have spent about $5 million of their funds, of their research funds to build these machines, and we've put in about $7 million against those $5 million. Not including the cost of the staff here. I'm just talking money we've spent to float the model. And we've built big machines. The first year, the deal to faculty was steal. We had people, you're not going to be able to do this. Nobody's going to trust you. Why on earth would I give you my money? We still started strongly with steal. And the deal was, you can just buy through the program. Just buy through the program. If you want to, come and take the computers off the loading dock and bring them back to your lab and run them yourself just like you always have. We've just saved you some money. How about that for a deal? If you want to leave them with us, here's the machine that we'll be building. We built steel. We built it in a day, which was very good, and I thought a great reflection on our ability to get things done. As a reporter remarked, he called it stunt computing. And yes, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that in there. But I think it was also important for us as an institution to show that we could do this. Because I know there are many who can't, for a variety of reasons. But I knew we could, so let's just do it, because we can. We were computing the first day that machine was turned on. Steele, which did rank in the top 500 the first 2 years of its existence, was followed by Coates, somewhat bigger machine, and now Rossmann. And that's where we've got at year 3. Now, there's 5 years in this program as it's designed. What have we got by year 3? 95 individual faculty members have invested their funds in nodes in one or more of these 3 machines. I'll tell you, 95 is a kind of a remarkably large number in this context. 17 are bought into 2, and 5 have bought into all 3. Here's the surprising chart. 2 weeks ago, I guess, 2 weeks ago, top 500, which lists the top 500 high-performance computers in the world, not academic computers, any computers. So the number 1 machine is a Chinese military machine, I believe. We've got banks in here, we've got car companies, we've got Europe, Asia, Russia, everybody's in here. Coates and Rossmann are ranked respectively 147 and 126 in that top 500. Now you say, so if you're a faculty member here, you've got access to these resources. What does that mean? And I think it's legitimate that we add those 2 together. In fact, a number of these sites have multiple machines listed in the top 500, so we aggregated their results together too. Steele isn't in the list, so Steele is not included. Number 1, by a mile, is Oak Ridge. Very nice, massive machine there. Number 2, TAC at Texas, University of Texas. Number 3, Colorado has won a big MRI award. That machine actually is a baby version of the Texas machine and actually isn't in Colorado yet. It's still being built in Texas. And number 4, Georgia Institute of Technology won a Track 2 award, 2D award, last year for $12 million. Bought themselves a machine. They just squeeze us out. Bearing in mind that those, certainly 3 of those 4, and I'm not quite sure about the terms of Colorado's deal, they're obligated to provide cycles to other people. That's not for the faculty on their campus. They're a national center. They're obligated to provide cycles to whoever is awarded cycles on those machines. Our machines are available for our faculty use. But of course, even curiouser, if that's a word, are the people that are underneath us. NCSA, number 6. The Arctic Region Supercomputing Center, number 8. Brookhaven National Lab, number 10. Minnesota Supercomputing, number 11. RPI, number 12. Number 14, the San Diego Supercomputing Center. And number 15, the Ohio Supercomputing Center. We're not even called a supercomputing center, for crying out loud. We need a new name. So next summer, we will build another one. And the summer after that, we will build another one. And the summer after that, we will build another one. And we will decommission Steele that year. Because the goal is to have 5 of these machines running at all times. What's also unusual about this is this has been funded by the community. There's no big data center purchase in here. There's no $60 million for a new data center. We've done this nip and tuck, building as we've needed to build. And if you're an investor, this is the computing equivalent of dollar cost averaging. We buy every year. So we're never caught badly out of step by a technical innovation, because whatever comes along, we're going to be able to take advantage of it. The folks that we see here, they buy a big machine, and then it kind of does that, and then they try and get another $5 or $10 million, and they buy another machine. So it looks like a sawtooth. I would expect, because we're not going to overtake TAC. Well, soon, right? But I would expect us to be very solidly right there or thereabouts every year now that we continue to do this, because our faculty will continue to win awards. So maybe we should think about that. I'm going to have some more on that in a second. Completely separately, we have this thing called Diagrid. I'm just going to mention it because I think it's a nice story. Diagrid uses waste computing cycles from desktop machines, from labs, from our big machines. It produces 280 teraflops. If you remember the numbers from the previous slide, isn't a lot, because they were in tens of thousands. But it's there. It's a good story. We need to understand how to grow this thing and make it a useful tool to the scientific community. These are the participating universities. University of Nebraska is new. They might beat us at football. We'll beat them at computing. My guys love this chart. They keep on giving it me every year, even though I don't like it. But that's all right. Every computing, there's a rule, right? Every computing chart must go up and to the right. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Up and to. So we've got that out of the way. Can we just stipulate to the, you've seen the up and to the right chart. So who are the faculty that buy into our clusters? Well, gosh, everybody buys into our clusters, because you can buy in for $2,000. You can buy one node for $2,000. And that's what a lot do. They buy one node. It's like, gosh, this is all right. Maybe I'll buy 10 next year, or 40, or whatever it might be. So they're all over. This isn't just one department in engineering or something that's done this. So how sustainable is the funding model? This is an important question. So we're going to do this thing. Okay, Gerry, you're going to have $2.5 million of faculty money next summer. You're going to have another $2.5, $3 million the summer after that, and the summer after that, and the summer after that. So as you well know, the president's charge to Richard Bacchius is to increase our level of external funding. And there's a very aggressive up and to the right graph that goes with that charge. And in 2008, on a much smaller number, the label isn't quite accurate. HPC accounted for 22% of the grant dollars awarded in terms of faculty members making explicit use of HPC. Accounted for 22% of the grant dollars awarded. The following year, on a bigger base, HPC accounted for 24.6% of the grants awarded, not requested, awarded. And then last year, which is the last year we have numbers for, we're at 40%. And remember that the pie is getting significantly bigger every year as well. It's not that the pie. I need, for future reference, Joan, we need a bigger pie as well as a bigger slice of the pie. Because it gives the visual impression that the pie is the same size and we're just taking more of it. The pie is actually getting significantly bigger. And we're taking a significantly bigger role in that spend. So it actually serves us well to try and get ahead of this and give faculty who don't typically want to be running their own high-performance computing environment an opportunity, buy into this thing. Here it is. If you don't want to do that, you can run your own stuff if you wish. Here's the kit, but we're not paying for anything else. You get a discount on the purchase. Good luck. Have a great day. So you see, I should show this at the front because it's like the management piece. See, so another rule, when you're talking to tech people, you always have up and to the right graphs. When you're talking to management people, you always have to have 2x2 matrices. Everything is reducible to a 2x2 matrix in management. So I've spared you the 2x2 matrix, and instead you get this animated pyramid. It's animated within PowerPoint, so bear with me. And remember what we said right at the beginning, what I said right at the beginning. Everything has to run effectively. Everything has to run. You're not credible if you can't keep the technology equivalent of the lights on. Email is unreliable, web service is unreliable, whatever. If you can't do that, then you can't talk about anything else. You have to do that. You have to be operationally credible, not excellent. Credible. And then there's a piece in the middle that's transformational, and then there's the stuff at the top that makes the rules of the game different. That's where we need to concentrate our resources. As a litmus test, badly run organizations, everything's in that bottom part. And the goal is to make it do that. We need to make the top bigger. And we need to make the bottom parts smaller. And any CIO will tell you the same thing, but I have an animated pyramid, and they don't. Because there's no future in being there's no future in operational work where we're not looking to provide another way to do business. Yes, ma'am?
That's a question. Efficiency, definitely reducing costs, I see the need. Another issue really constant in my mind is about effectiveness. Mm-hmm. Also, user satisfaction. Mm-hmm. You know, if you cut the cost and you cannot meet the needs, and then teaching, learning, or research probably not be effective because of the hub. You know, teaching, learning is a big audience, users. Mm-hmm.
So we can't be our own measure of success. That's the first rule. You know, people that come into my office and say, well, we're doing a great job on thus and such, and we need to spend some money here. It's like, who says? Who says you're doing a great job? Because you telling me you're doing a great job is like me selling hair restorer. No credibility, sorry. So if we're going to be involved in the teaching and learning space or the research space, we're going to take our direction from the people that are very good at doing that. And they're going to tell us whether we're being helpful or not. We're not going to tell them. There's people in the room that work with me a lot, and I hope they're tired of hearing me say that. We don't get to measure how well we do our job. We can have opinions about it. We can provide data and, you know, collect anecdotes. But at the end of the day, if faculty don't trust you, in this case, if students don't trust you, then you've got nothing, basically. Did I just make something happen? How do I go backwards on this thing? Do we know? There, like that. So I would say we don't move unilaterally, ever. We move in cohort with however the institution defines the people who should have a vote here. I'm trying to answer your question as honestly as I can. In the research space, in the cluster space, we could do this thing and just offer it, because foot traffic would tell us whether we were right or not. If faculty don't want to play, that tells us everything we need to know, right there. Teaching is a lot harder because there's not obvious foot traffic. And so you have to have other methods of measuring, are we being successful in here or not? So we use a lot of performance and output metrics. And when we're engaging with faculty, we're going to put very high value on that. Do students actually learn better as a consequence of this change, whatever the change might be? And if they don't, why are we making it? I'm a feeling I haven't answered your question as well as I might have.
For example, right now I teach in the computer lab, and it's since we changed to this whatever's done in the lab, it's much slower. And
okay.
It's a problem. And then there's no way if you don't. I guess I sent a submit request and I didn't get an answer. It basically is there's nothing I can do to help facilitate the teaching learning environment.
You can send me a note. I'm serious. That's open. I've been a customer of the computing organization on this campus, and I have sent messages when I was a customer that were ignored for weeks at a time. So I know exactly what it's like. And I know we have a fine organization with many excellent, hardworking people in it. And I know we have other people in it too. I know that. And I can't see everything from where I sit. And I'm not even going to pretend that I can see much. But if people send me a note, this is what happened to me, I can promise you I will pursue that. I can promise you I will pursue that. That doesn't necessarily mean you'll get the outcome you like, but I can promise you you won't be ignored. And that's important. That's important. Teaching is much harder than supporting research. Supporting teaching is much harder than supporting research, and you have to tread very carefully. Sheesh, Carol, is it that bad? Okay. Anything else? Anybody? Good question. You can come and buttonhole me afterwards, and I'll give you a business card and everything. You can send me what you've got on that. So this is a picture I hope some of you have seen before. It used to hang in my office. It doesn't anymore. It's the Office of the Future from the London Illustrated News, 1938, I want to say, 43. I can't remember, something like that. A long time ago. London Illustrated News is now a defunct publication, doesn't exist anymore. This is the interesting challenge that faces technologists. Design the office of the future. So, how can you tell it was supposed to be the office of the future? Somebody answer me. It's not a trick question. How can you... Shiny, very good. There's actually a more obvious stylistic thing in here. It's streamlined. In the 40s, everything modern was streamlined. Remember the streamliner cars and the streamliner outfits? Everything was streamlined. That showed it's modern, right? The bit that I love, of course, is the ticker tape machine is streamlined. Is this thing over here? Does anybody not know what a ticker tape machine is? That's an embarrassing question. That was that very old communications device, and it spat out paper tape. I don't know what, like 10 baud or something like that would have been its like communication, right? But to show it was modern, they made it streamlined. There's the dilemma for the IT person. There's the dilemma right now. Because, of course, the artist, and it's not fair to beat up on the artist completely misses the point of modernity. The office of the future won't have a ticker tape machine in it because there'll be no need for one, streamlined or otherwise. And that's how do we engage to find out what's needed in the classroom of the future or the lab of the future. Because if all we're going to have is a room that looks like this, with everybody now sitting with an electronic device instead of a parchment and quill, we've just made an aerodynamic ticker tape machine. That's the point. And how do we engage people to understand? How do we engage faculty? How do we engage students so that also we're not just throwing out the ticker tape machine because we think it's old-fashioned? Because maybe it's fine for another 10 years or another 100 years. We don't know. How do we find that out? That's our challenge. And that can only come in like meaningful and continuous conversations. How did that work for you? Why was that good? Why was it better than that? Did this help? Who did it help? Why did it help them? Are we really going to have our lunch eaten by for-profit universities? Hard to see that happening. Hard to see that happening. What about the future of residential universities? Wow, very expensive. Maybe too expensive. Maybe not. What does it mean? Oh, there's 100 questions that flow right behind that. How do we engage in those conversations? That's the trick for us. And we have to do that while we're maintaining operational credibility. There's our challenge. We can't just go and be like this R&D group. We can't be Xerox PARC. We'll be back to you in 10 years with a bright idea. Can't do that. We have a business to run here, and simultaneously, we have to do new stuff. And the only way we can do that is engaging with the people that actually do it, the faculty and the students. 419, the end. Would anybody like to ask another question? Yes, sir.
So you've shown on the faculty side how faculty are getting more money for awards and spending more on high performance computing. But that's only one half of it, right? You said yourself that ITAP has put forward like $7 million to run these. Is
right.
ITAP prepared and capable to continue spending $7, $10 million for the next community cluster? You know, keep going with
Yep, we have to. Yes. Because I can't change the business model halfway through. That's, I think, called bait and switch, right? Yeah, you came in on this deal, but it turns out, hey, we ran out of money. I present this to my bosses, to my executive, as an incredibly cost-effective way of solving this problem. Other places still work on the model that we're going to build a huge data center, we're going to buy a big machine and put it in the middle of the data center, and then faculty are going to ignore that big machine because it doesn't run the way they want it to run. And I mean that with a small r. I'm not talking about operating systems or anything like that. I'm just saying, how do I get access to this machine that you bought, right? So they go and buy their own cluster. So you're back exactly where you started, except now you've got this temple to information technology that you just spent $50 or $60 million on. So for those of you old enough to remember this, I used to call this the microvax effect, which is, yeah, you may have a big stonking machine over there in that building, but I'm going to go buy myself this microvax, and the job might take 3 weeks on it, and it might only take 45 minutes on yours. But the fact is, I know it's going to be finished in 3 weeks. And I can't rely on your machine ever, because you're going to make me sit in a queue, or you're going to do this, or you're suddenly going to turn the machine off because you want to do this other thing, or it just sits over there in a corner and it just gurgles away. And that's the challenge, because there's no trust, there's no communication. What is it the faculty want? They want reliable service. They hit the switch, the light comes on. Now, if they can do that in a value-rich way, so here's your money, I'm going to add this other money on top of it, so you're even getting more than you paid for, it seems to me that's a winning strategy. Is that what you were asking me?
Partially. Well, partly also, as people who write checks to ITAP, the administration of the university, they're seeing this as a winning solution, that they're going to keep funding ITAP to keep, they want you to keep the labs open, they want you to keep the computers running and stuff for the teaching and the research.
Of course.
But for this particular, for the RCAC community clusters, they're going to continue to make sure that you have enough money to do that.
Right. And we have to run smarter. And I say we here in the corporate IT at Purdue sense, not in the ITAP sense. ITAP clearly has to run smarter. We make choices all the time, because there's a certain pot of money. It's not limitless. So you're choosing to do this or not do that. You're choosing to do this or not do that. And you have to continue to make those choices, and some of them are not pleasant choices, and maybe that might be what the lady at the back is referring to. I don't think so. I'll bet there's another issue there, but I don't think that was a money issue, frankly. But we'll find out. But yes, once we kind of set our face to it, then we say this is how we're going to do business. And proper forward planning and proper budgeting says, here's our 5-year plan. This is how we intend to pay for it. This is, It's not just every month we turn around and somebody says, oh, are you going to build another cluster? It's like, no, you know we're going to build one. You know exactly when we're going to do it, and you know what we're going to do the year after that, and you know what we're going to do the year after that. So there's not a surprise in here. Sometimes surprises happen at the state level, the national level, that you have to then adapt to. But all you need is a decent plan and lay out to people what it is you're doing and justify what it is you're doing. All right, thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes. So you talked about the functional part of ITAP, how it has to, you have to have it prepared. But then the sexy part, as it were, is all the research stuff at the top.
Right.
How do you get good people to work in the functional part and be excited about the functional part without them being drawn on to the more fun part?
Right. So sometimes the fun part isn't fun for some people. And sometimes what we would regard as the more prosaic part isn't all that prosaic to some people. You've got to line up the right people with the right jobs. So that may sound a little glib. I don't believe it is. So I'll tell you a little narrative here. So I have what I call my bad news groups and my good news groups in ITAP. Doug Foster is a good example of a member of my bad news groups, or Mike Rubish, perhaps. If they appear in my doorway, it means they've got bad news. That's what I mean by my bad news groups. If they appear, something's broken or gone wrong, or somebody just turned a big fan on, right? And they're there to warn me about that. They're my bad news groups, because in an ideal world, they bat 1,000 and nothing else. Payroll. What's the perfect payroll? No mistakes, right? So if you're perfect, they're just doing their job. Aren't they paid to do that? Isn't that their job, to run payroll? What's the big deal, right? If they're perfect, they're okay. The good news groups, John runs the largest good news group, the Academic Technologies group. He doesn't have bad news, bluntly. And if he does, it's a really bad day. He's in one of my good news groups. So if he's appearing in my doorway, it's to give me good news. So the challenge for him is he's got to keep a steady drip of good news coming into me, because otherwise I get quite frustrated. You're getting all the resources, You're getting all the PR, you're getting all the attention. Where's the good stuff? The other folks are on a diet, so I'm a lot more sympathetic to them when they appear when something's gone wrong. So things even out. Some people don't like playing in that lead role. They'd rather play defense, right? And that's about, I mean, you have that in all kinds of jobs. You have that in state government. You have it all over the place. There are people with, I mean, bluntly, in the last place I worked, I can remember somebody saying to me, "Why do you even work in IT?" And they were taking a shot at me, actually, just for a change. And they meant it because there's nothing good can come out of that organization. All you can ever do is mess things up for people. So why would you even go into that line of work? Because there's something in here that we enjoy about it. There's something about the transformative power, or we like problem solving, or we like providing service, or we like doing this, or we like doing that. And you've got to try and line people up with the jobs that give them some level of satisfaction, because there will inevitably be bad days. But I do think when you give people more and you expect more from them, that's not a place everybody's completely comfortable being. They'd rather say, I'll give me less and expect less from me. And so that's just a kind of, I haven't thought in detail about that answer, but that's kind of my first cut at how I would answer. It's a good question, though. Ma'am?
Well, I would say one thing is I'd like to listen to your presentation in terms of giving me a big picture to look at things from the Purdue perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And my sense of this is a good question, and your response let me think about, overall, actually, we're in this society right now, we have to think about, why do I go to work? Do I look at how can I do better? You know, Purdue model, what is called excellence. Do we really go to work and how can we do a better job? And that kind of, well, if we have that kind of vision, we develop satisfaction. It's not because there's no problem. How can I do better so it's more efficient? Then that is not money can buy, is that it?
So I have to tell you a little story, and then I will stop because it's time for a drawing, and I know we're all waiting to see who's going to win the super prize. So a man goes into a quarry, and there are 3 people cutting stone in the quarry. And he says to the first one, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm cutting stone." And he says to the second one, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm earning a living." And he says to the third one, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm building buildings." All true, all accurate. What is it you think you're doing? And you see, that goes back to what you asked earlier as well. What is it you think you're doing here? And how do you define it? How do you define yourself in that? And you can take a minimalist, negative view of that. You can take a maximalist, I'm changing the world. I know you've heard me say this before, that after guarding the borders of the country and saving people's lives in hospitals, we have the 3rd most important job in the country. We give high-quality educational opportunity to people who couldn't afford to get it from private institutions. That's what we do. Some days it doesn't feel like that. That's the truth. Some days it feels bad. But are you here chopping stone? Are you here making a living? Are you here building a city?